Hello, my name is Anthony Wall, aka Romulus, and I was listening to Tulsi Gabbard. Part of I didn't have time for the whole thing. It's like an hour long, but I recorded not trying to, you know. But for example, like relative to black people's rights of eyes, worse than criminal incompetence, that a certain type of victim slash hyper victim forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to speak formally for, like, for example, what reassign black people's rights of eye and when nature communicates with it, when nature is not criminal insidiousness nature, and how nature communicates that, how that's not debatable, where it appears to be debatable, how that is gotten away with. In other words, for example, also why are crime acts and methods are self-valued by the police forms at countries A through Z, as their roles too. The people from Saudi Arabia and the people from America are self-valued with their identities used remotely, criminally foreign influence slash hyper-criminally foreign influence here and there. In other words, you guys are victims slash hyper victims, victim predator slash hyper predator, where you guys respond to other people and to everything goes around, leaving out the breaching method. In other words, forgiveness is because there's a breaching method that hurt everyone and is still has everyone rolls with it itself. Since before our modern religions messengers were even born, there are proofs that it is more probable and demonstrable that from off the sciences locations, the names of the people of the sciences were forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, taken a shotgun, not even realizing, to uses of their own names, other people's names, and the names of this people of the sciences themselves. You know, with little use in the nature itself of our species, but volume science of individual bodies, with all group differences no longer more and more allowed to appreciate where how nature generates them. It's showing that because that's what it's showing. It's just showing us there's a species volume science here. Not you guys, your species volume didn't, but a body of individual bodies didn't invent it. The other species bodies, the fish didn't invent how they have two eyes and we have two eyes. We didn't invent that. But what is not us or nor them, but it was all things anyway, invented it. And that's one of the ways it shows itself to us. It shows us those three parts of time. It shows us the value of the seasons. It's showing us to an extent. It's showing us its complete identity relationship to itself, though, with the extent of its body is shown where we are shown by the all space, the identity of all space slash existence, how the value of seasons before they even get here. But now we are valuing this through systems tactile terror from that one hyper native. That one nature itself shows us the value, how that breaching method, to discern how that breaching method was and is consciously capable of using, not just as an asymmetrical attack, rolls with its sustained breaching method, having been entrenched since before the founders of modern countries A through Z, and since right through their foundings. Our founders communicated enough declassified. They did not have free speech. All reach. We are forced by countries A through Z to negotiations by locations, areas, and states that speak about economics, leaving out the breaching method. That is one excuse for every single leader of every country who goes above locations, areas, and states and looks down styles A through Z. The differences and the exceptions. All self-valued roles with planting fake exceptions, nature use tactical terror for how nature needs to be used for short words to be appreciated properly, let alone the protraction, like those regarding the significance of the value of this hyper-evidential, so to speak. Having black people as whites of eyes, simultaneously having had this left out, where how it is inseparable from subjects like slavery, and has answers, not just this question and questions simultaneously. Its identity relationship to itself, and the value of that only increasing. Shows that in how we have been systems, not just ulterior from its own, where how it is also further positive onto itself. Our special difference, Earth's a special difference, for example, is forced from here as a negative identity relationship to itself. So not appreciating Earth's a special difference, our own. Consciousness is a special difference. For example, with relativity to the brain. Black people's whites of eyes are all about relativity, no theory here. Again, it's showing us simultaneously other things too. That same identity that is not the other species body is not ours, but it's all things anyway. It is that body that has us know those three parts of time that we know always. And those three parts of time that we know that are not always. And that's also three parts of truths that we know always. And what, in other words, for example, it's critical to understand, not just as Americans, because A through Z, not one modern country founder had free speech. All truths for why they didn't have free speech and how they didn't have free speech, they were used for lies. In other words, and for fake motivations, screening motivations roles. And increasingly, they're only capable of being all kinds of other names, listening to conversations. And people interpreting that, pretending not, and increasingly really not, really more and more discerning. Remembering how they know, since we are kids, there's other people just saying things at locations and online to cover up what was already at all natures of crime scenes next to them, all sides of cases, the courts, the intelligence tied to them, news at the same time. They put the same sequence shifts, the same differences rackets, the same pretended faith, narratives regarding faith, trust in people. The FBI and other agencies and courts have roles of wire and mail crime acts and methods where they just fake the transcripts. They speak about the branches of government separation of powers. I only know his name, like the Adolph Farrell. I don't even know his father's name. His father made confessions to me about his roles with years later. Because I remember they're involved with years apart. Child abusers, leaders of the kids first forced. They have roles with probation, with probate judges involved with their family. I don't even know other names. I know two of the brothers' names. And a whole bunch of their intimate ties. I only know one, trying to make fake exception of knowing me. Involved with all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders, with some KKK black theme, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, inter-campuses, including fire campuses, including medical campuses, including town lines, all along roads and routes like Route 3, which goes by the state judicial branch offices. No. And conjunctions to it, too. The differences of that was is used remotely as people roles with World Trade Center attack, predicate acts, like WFSB, Channel 3 News. And Wethersfield police are increasingly with people with child abusers, leaders of kids, on and off campuses, painting fake ties and fake natures of ties to kids with foreign and domestic families. Wethersfield Pizza House has roles with this. Real close to state judicial branch offices, no. Whole bunch of people tied to them. and their neighbors involved with all kinds of natures of organized crime, and the people involved with like New Mexico, Mexico, and Canada, and Maine, and Vermont, involved with people on my street with predicate acts, wire crime acts, and methods. Police attached me to fake conversations with them when I was a kid and now as an adult. They did that at the same time with overt criminal enterprises, plural, and private ones, and with uses of their own differences and the differences of other people. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, while being and having been used remotely. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. All kinds of mail and wire crime acts and methods. A Leahy family pretended through the mail they had conversations with me. They apparently forged the name of a Dr. Shamsi Ali, who will confess to you that, I never had conversations with them. They've been charging people. They've been charging so much money to put fake conversations with people in databases, fake uses of drugs and alcohol by themselves and their family members, while tactically delusions raw. Psychiatry at countries A through Z. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. You guys have the audacity to have people with badges there and with gavels and their family members involved with all kinds of natures of organized crime. Their homes, other people's homes, all sides of crime scenes and next to the campuses. Increasingly, Trinity College is involved with a whole bunch of people planting evidences with people in my area involved. And there's nothing personal with them either. They'll tell you too. They were attached to fake change communications to people, gave affidavits about this. They increasingly problems between people, and there's other people involved with it. And through time, there were timed use of that years later too, even with timed untimely deaths involved, murders and body dumping spots. And we're going to discuss that here because no one has the integrity to discuss it in the background. The FBI to investigate. If they investigated anything I said, they did it wrong. Because in other words, I still don't have a response of paper. There are a whole bunch of people I recognize and ones I don't know the names of involved with violence and threats against me on my street and against the kids not to keep their mouth shut with distinct natures of organized crimes. These are people with the police forms and unmarked with a whole bunch of different countries, wherever they think about, like, these people have at countries A through Z the audacity to speak for law and leave out black people's rights of eyes. They have the audacity to speak for with the nature pretending and nature of debate. They're changing and faking what we say when we speak about George Washington's extortion and James Madison's plan. That which George Washington and James Madison's plan, they had to counter and force the rest of the founders as the colonists and as the Native Americans. They had the Native Americans on their side too, though. There are proofs, not just because of the president/chief. That's not just a theme. In other words, that's why I wish that, in other words, we need to hyper-additionally appreciate that. How the breaching method uses that. Such differences, measuring and maintaining. Identity, speaking about such serious things like Native American rights, or colonist rights even. There were certain type of victim/hyper victim that had no out. A through Z. The Native Americans, they were already forced to fight with Native Americans. There are proofs before. With their own human bodies. A through Z against A through Z. There is no nature of unity that is hyper native anymore. But that's what everyone longs. See, with this breaching method set it up, that people stacking in New York and in cities throughout the world. In the background of the rap videos, with the aggression against it is using natures of logic and logic that is collusion/S and defenses of itself, which is offensively up front, and there are means to discern it, where and how offensively the interbranch use and have used on a mass scale at countries A through Z. Summaries like of the law where they have the right to lie, where and how they use that where they don't have the right to lie. Even increasingly, they don't realize at the same time because of their self-value use /s of criminally foreign influence, factory nature, quality aspects of nature while being and haven't been used remotely, pretending other. And self-value, we're not even realizing it being used remotely by the hyper-foreign, that country's A through Z. Nature itself shows us that. Our founders communicated for us to understand how we were separated. We were forcing England to fight against internationally monitored conversations. They didn't want to do that because of this breaching method's distinct method of torture, extortion, in fact, human nature slavery, therefore physical slavery of England. And they had to and have to pretend other to an extent, or be discerned as a body, as an individual, or as even if as a majority of countries on their side, even if all the countries on their side. And it is adapted to. It's not by accident, just that stupid suit and tie counter and exceptions with the same fake exceptions, sequence of self-value. Natures of Boolean logic that can't defend themselves and afford to discern all the revelations that come with having black people's whites of eyes. Can't even appreciate the quality of debate necessary. In other words, what if that famous phrase, like one of the only things they get Americans to remember is that someone said, "Don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes." Meanwhile, black and white, the black pupils and the whites of eyes are every standing colonist. Northern colonies and southern colonies, sickly distinctly, they were possessions of other countries themselves. Sickly distinctly, the possession / hyper possession, fact, treatment, nature wise, syntax wise, identity wise, of that showing element to use them remotely, whether they're the top of it or the bottom. They have to keep other things, others, or selves blamed for things that nature is demonstrating and for us to blame on the breaching method. A human fact, treatment, nature, breaching method, nature shows us is one of the things that is true always, that slavery was value as relative to itself. It's only increasing value progression. That as the valuable seasons, even if they never get here, only increasing value. It is showing us that it's most probable and demonstrable, most practical to theorize, let alone convict, that and how more and more forever nature is being made through temporary / lasting space nature, and through a process that is appreciating a special difference. Here, where even the bugs have an extent of consciousness and of ability not just to communicate with ourselves, but to understand ourselves. In other words, because we are that thing that is not us nor them, but it is all things anyway. We could ignore its system, its complete system, but it will demonstrate with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, as the breaching method knew that it would. And it effectively employed nature's needs and styles of victims / hyper victims responding to what it caused and kept and keeps. As styles I can't defend rules with that and the Constitution unabridged, and what nature's actually demonstrating. without blaming other things, others, ourselves, or or sentencing someone for it. Because only an individual could defend the order of the finite. Could the four short words proper at last. In other words, no one could let someone try to defend on paper that they believe that, and try to give examples of how legitimate science spoke for New York City, for any city or any suburb, and their logic and their nature and their reason will have inherent to it, active to it, and progressive to it, demonstration /s, that they are wrong. And of the same thing /s, which is a breaching method that caused negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, enforced roles with it, specifically for everyone to use the truths with that, for lies. And then to defend roles with that, needs like with that, styles with that to hide through. Fluent through countries A through Z. Distinct from economic possession of it is syntactical possession, therefore functional. That's why we're supposed to have free speech. That's why we're not supposed to allow news and interbranch to keep stacking predicate acts with facts and roles as fronts, multi-front, where with all natures of investigators are and have been used at countries A through Z, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. Great people used remotely criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw. Whole wire crime acts and methods, mail crime acts and methods, self-valued by them when they defend the identities of the FBI. They put fake transcripts in there. They have roles of predicate acts with facts, methods, and names at and next to each campus I went to in my life. And they have roles with the same house /s, whole bunch of direct and indirect ways. That's why you guys can't get it. One of the reasons you guys can't get it on paper, and you interbranch Connecticut switched and forged names. Increasingly, names with conjunctions to the Wethersfield, Connecticut Judicial Branch offices and the Wethersfield, Connecticut Corrections offices. They have roles with former Director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants and their family members, and people in businesses next to those locations, and people just driving by. There are proofs where relative to where and how they have predicate acts, facts, methods, and have people. There are proofs that they recorded a Bobby Jean after she was already recorded communicating other. And years before that, through the years, increasingly people are making their confessions on the sides of Central Connecticut State University in Connecticut. They have all kinds of roles with intelligence families from Wethersfield, Connecticut, that are involved with a whole bunch of different countries at the same time. And as intelligence here and there, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, incapable of speaking, defending how they spoke for and speak for the law, and of affording to be, let alone to protract, short words proper, with theory, let alone with conviction by black pupils, whites of eye, with science proper. You don't leave this out. Regardless who, if they were gray people, and they were the ones in the cities. We don't leave out the suburbs were designed before America's founders were born. A whole bunch of ways for torture, extortion, and fact-cheating nature, slavery of every single standing body, including every group, and including every complete name of any colony, any grouping of colonies, all natures of counters all natures of war, all natures of peace. The difference of that used to hide its identity of relativity to us into positive and negative as criminal and ceaseless natures of positive and negative with subject treatments, with name treatments, value treatments. Trust. The Constitution stands abridged or bust. In other words, we're supposed to get the Constitution unabridged and appreciate it. Why is the witch trials place next to Webb House? And why is Webb House renamed the Webb Stevens House? And that's in the nature of debate regarding that is sensing for the breaching method. That there are self-valued roles of criminally foreign influence, fact, treatment, nature, quality aspects in nature itself as criminal and season, criminally foreign influence nature. That with passions and emotions pretending to be American, pretending to be patriot, A through Z. Clearer than day, real science, honesty, real patriotism would have revealed what nature communicates, what our founders communicated. They did not have free speech. The nature of debate regarding it contains quality aspects of nature relative where and how. All databases, relationships, and identities of relativity / relativities plural. Relativity by that singular breaching method that was sickly non-distinctly northern colonies and southern colonies through different countries. No. Sickly non-distinct, but also sickly distinctly involved with those unnatural things, natural only as criminal insidiousness nature, like slavery, like witch trials, like roles with that method that prevented our founders' free speech and forced other pretended then and now. Otherwise, that body would be sentenced, including that body was a majority of people, including was everyone, would be adapted to too. Enough young Americans, in other words, and adult Americans too. But I mean, with what we want to do to help Native Americans, what we want to do to value how sickly distinctly they are prevented, clean water. In other words, one of the ways the breaching method, we're not going to pretend that science stood at all in the cities because it never stood at all in the suburbs. And there are the actual proofs of this. See, people like Bernie Sanders are forcing President Trump while being used remotely to force President Trump to stay entertaining debates about math, stay entertaining about debates about inflation, etc., value, resources, through and as systems abridged. Countries A through Z, their leaders have to have natures of debate while the locations, areas, and states are leaving out how the breaching method employed that. The difference of guilt. When did industries not have guilt as their roles with the breaching method? Criminally poor influence, tactically delusions, rot, pretending other. Then they can't even afford at locations unobstructed. Like they need crammed courts. They already had collusions only known since founding. That's part of the reason they pretend we need trust. We have obligations every day where American history is taught to understand that the difference between the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, the witch trials, the rest of other roles with other crazy laws against every single person, and with the blacks sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly too, northern colonies and southern colonies, not just England. There were internationally monitored conversations here themselves, used remotely, individually grouped it together. Clearer than day, how? Fake branches bow, but they recede. Species body of individual bodies longs to tread and then proceed. All this rest recede. We already polluted the entire ocean. We could make more energy and save more energy and make, who doesn't long clear water, beautiful water? We could drop it in beautiful ways and afford nature's a means of infrastructure better than free. Space means come out of nowhere. The agreements for people to use their land and do it that way, and to fathom doing it or doing it, they come out of nowhere. Can make the temporary websites with those functions. We have to have security based on security comes through the difference between hyper positive and positive as criminal insidiousness nature. The difference between positive and criminal insidious nature shows that the fact that positives can be truths can be used for lies. Peace could be just as a criminal insidious nature of peace. Could be a screen. And it was and is, but it was by a hyperforeign specifically to keep only capable of being. Styles of defenses of integrity voices, like for any of the people, the names of the people of sciences, where they can't defend that logic in nature without blaming or valuing having been blamed other things, others ourselves. For things caused by that breaching method and by roles with it sustained. Not one has trained. Take the best person you know. Put them in that people stacking in New York City. And take them through that different school and make them for that other education. Their impositions. When people speak about equality, we are doing it now with systems through systems tactical terror, even with the subject treatments. Nature shows us, for example, its body to an extent. Like those ways, like the way with the 3 parts of time that are grouped, and like with how the fish didn't invent how all the species by other species bodies, monkeys, birds, hippopotamus, porcupine, 2 eyes, birds. We didn't invent it; they didn't invent it. But that, which is all things anyway, so us too. It invented it, but it is hyper-additional from us. Well, as us, hyper-additionally. Where and how more of its identity, the identity of all things at once. Where there is war, there's something like, would you want the parts of your body, speaking about peace, if they knew they were parts of a body and they're leaving that out? We have to show the difference between peace and hyper peace to names A through Z. Our campuses, thank God, at least they were all breached. There's a method by it. There's a rules with difference. Clearer than day when they're speaking about Islamic Caliphate. You guys are fronts. We have this thing takes both sides of issues. The beginning, though, the Quran says, all that matters is not an Islamic Caliphate. It says all that matters is being honest about the identity of all space/existence, for how I'm interpreting it. But it says all that matters is being honest about the use of the name of Allah. I'm honest about that. I don't know if you could discern that. It's a scientific value here too, where again we didn't invent things, and other species' bodies didn't invent things, but only where and how we are that body. That is that, and even if you make something up, its volume science is inseparable from it. From it as the difference between the finite, smallest finite detail, or the order of the finite. It is distinctly itself, then non-distinctly, simultaneously, further as the group details, active, and further as progressive, as it shows us again, the value of seasons that are not even here, even if they never get here, how they're only increasing the value, because it is its body. It is that identity of value, precise value progression. We actually are true always. And we have to use these hyper-evidential truths when we address anywhere, let alone those people, those places most overtly impositioned upon by that tactically denatured below their feet, only having been remembered. And now they are people stacked upon, having been people stacked upon. Thank God now in the background of rap videos long enough for us to understand and to start to think about this. But we cannot do it properly if we don't understand how the suburbs were and are designed, tactically denatured to cause negative value nature progressions, acts and natures, by the breaching method, to make the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts and natures, self-valued, as criminal insidious natures of means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts and natures. Nature doesn't long us to thirst, so we can go buy plastic bottles and throw more plastic into the ocean. Nature doesn't want us to counter that, countering ourselves rather than the principles treatments overall. The campuses are sick not because they didn't have enough money, not because they couldn't tell the difference between money and resources, because they came through sick campuses. James Madison's plan has been replaced, and we're directed to refer to our founders plural as him singular. That's what I read. It makes perfect sense. Because then they went and got George Washington to agree to help them. That's why part of the reason that George Washington said that he was extorted. There are proofs that he had to help them. They wouldn't allow him any other choice. But he agreed to help them too because he was extorted, also worse, tortured, and enslaved too. In fact, human nature, therefore, physically, like everyone else. Because that's the value of what life was per what was recorded, no matter who you were. That was the value of those laws. We don't separate what witch trials are from slavery, where how slavery was entrenched in northern colonies and southern colonies. We don't separate the breaching method's use of that. Right through our founders' presidencies, they did not have free speech. They left us proofs to communicate it. They left us means to communicate about this. You guys are dishonestly saying, well, I don't see your evidence. You guys are dishonestly valuing what you read. Because you guys are already shown by the breaching method since you were little kids. You need to hide how you were placed. With nature, in other words, witch trials and slavery is about how the difference between the foreign bodies, our own intelligence, the interbranch foreign, the interbranch here, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, insidiousness of people A through Z, the news, the communications, locations, put in the same sequence ships. There are differences of collusion /S with the breaching method used to hide the breaching method. It's not legitimate one grouping of humanity, one couplement of it. Even the neighbors that are actually neighbors. We have been systems tactical terror from that which is the value of cell, nucleus, cell, body, cell wall /S. In that appreciating gases and water, and the gases in their mixture, and water in their mixture. And no, we learn about gases. We know about gases that we can't even see them. We're dealing with the invisible but still discernible. But there's further hyper invisible but still discernible, or hyper simultaneous but still discernible, distinctly discernible, but not distinctly, simultaneously / hyper simultaneous. So in other words, FBI has roles with wire crime methods self-valued by other police forms, whiting forensics, and state police families interstates, with houses and with campuses involved, also with their Facebook pages. Facebook pages recording, confessing, demonstrating, and confirming. Since before they were Meta, they have roles with Wethersfield Police, New Britain Superior Court's Facebook page, Wethersfield Police Facebook page, people who type on it, like people with the name Joshua Schumack, Joshua Julian on a principal upskirt Nature's campus. Involved also a whole bunch of people recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, tied to a Joshua Schumack and his mother, involved with digital crimes and with identity theft and frauds with a whole bunch of different private school kids who planted evidences, including increasingly with people with the interbranch and foreign at the same time. Intelligence, the same thing. The people that didn't even go to the same schools who are planting evidences with people who didn't even have classes together, and who are also collusion /S with people that make fake exceptions, pretend other, who are also planting evidences on all sides of people's houses. It was a whole bunch of natures of organized crimes at once I recorded, involved with the years apart, first forced child abusers, the years of the kids, with our more involved further. To it, they're confessing this because they're all through silence. They have obligations to respond, but by staying in backgrounds and not responding, with the interbranch forging and switching names and planting evidences with news too, and with the sources, all along roads and routes too. All kinds of predicate, all kinds of natures of organized crimes roles were involved with the subject treatments, and they left that out. They were shown needs, and they were shown needs to know this. People with the name Domain repeated sexual things about Alison Mulcahy and their roles with an algebra class teacher I had, who planted evidence, who has roles with predicate acts with names on all sides of my house, and against them too. And the difference of that was issues remotely criminally foreign influence too. These are people also with sexual and religious syntax. She repeated, or with Mike Domain, her roles being Jewish. And it has roles with collusions with people that have roles with lobbyists. I don't know if they're Jewish, but at A through Z, they have excuses, but they don't use them properly. Otherwise, it would have revealed that and how we are in a semi-ancient trap that a difference is racketeering method worse than war crimes. We have black people's whites of eyes to discern it. So, in other words, there's a nature of debate that's forced to force a quality of fact should be nature that's collusion /S, pretending they didn't realize all sides of criminal and civil cases in the courts and the intelligence tied to them, their state offices, their houses, their neighbors, their sources, the news at the same time. They're planning overt criminal enterprise, private one, terrorists planted in the same sequential criminal delusions. The Quran says, only defend right here. Only defend. The Old Testament too has a part. Only defend right here, where the names of the people, the sciences will come together and the part that comes before it. I'm asking people faith free either religion or not. In other words, I'm saying there are proofs that pantheism is a science that needs to appreciate as a scientific value the Trinity and the name of Allah per a scientific method and of other gods, because people aren't supposed to agree about the name of God because nature is showing us how it is functional, but how there is a distinct hyper-invisible but still discernible. That's also what we can discern, coming with the value of being able to discern invisible but still discernible gases, carbon gases, with oxygen. They're toxic, but not. We need them. The right mixture is positive. And note too, water, what's usually clear water, but there are exceptions. Exception nature is involved. But it shows us too when we learn about that. It shows us that nature uses exceptions. Exception nature the ways we know. Also ways further. Group by itself, where it is distinctly itself, not juxtaposed with ourselves, or as that part of itself that gains our value anyway. There are a bunch of ways we are not valued, but we are that value anyway. Like, it is not us who invented all the two eyes of all these different species, bodies of individual bodies. They with all group differences. That's where it's showing us its own difference. It's showing us how it is functional, being hyper invisible but still discernible. And sure, I forgot in other words. So we're going to appreciate how this is about a predicate acts with facts delivery system method / methods, needs, natures, and styles, including when they're, in other words. And they're really just fishing, because we have these whole predicate acts and predicate act methods. Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with themselves as a kid, now as an adult. There are some Mendez police involved with the Wethersfield police and at locations next to Fox Connecticut News, too, with people named Domain and Mulcahy and neighbors of theirs, increasingly people tied to a former Mayor Gold and one that was, and other ones, like Anna Ruth, who is a wife of a former mayor, who's next to the state education department, involved with a whole bunch of people, all kinds of natures of organized crimes with the campuses and with the databases, and with knowing where people are going to be, timing where they're going to be, putting fake exception in, rules with uses of all natures of investigations, remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw. A Richard Dabrowski, he made a fake exception of knowing me by calling me on the phone. In person. Before that, he had no communication. And I don't know him. I never had a class with him. Never saw him around campus. A Richard Dabrowski. He's one of the ones involved with the intelligence families, with Rhodes Conjunctive to Two-Route Highway and Hangdog Lane. Involved further with people involved with the Department of Education and with the campuses, intercampuses and intracampuses. There's a South Civiello, and his neighbors are increasingly involved with body dumping spots and various natures of federal criminals, and before they got caught too, including if that was faked, and they're trying to establish themselves unmarked police. Increasingly, there's a John LeConte and his daughter, Dawn LeConte. She's involved with sexual and medical offenders. Okay, I never had a word of conversation with her. There were a whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital next to them with the foreign and domestic intelligence, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw. More scams on the people of Hartford Hartford, then there are streets in Hartford with houses on them, probably people in them too, just for, a few dozen people. And foreign and domestic military. The military of Connecticut increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake motivations for Wyatt too. And while tactical delusions wrought and being and haven't been used remotely, criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence. It's recorded how the identities of Saudi Arabia and of America, of countries A through Z, how they're used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions wrought by what is not A through Z, that employed A through Z, only capable, only allowing individual leaders to entertain how locations, areas, and states are reliant upon other things, others themselves, blamed for the real causes of the worst natures of negative nature progressions, acts, and natures. This where and how we are, this quality of diffusion, where we are automatically relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. But we are further a quality of diffusion, but we are forced not to appreciate this as how nature has its hyper-additionally a system. Instead, we have the hyper-additionally how the breaching method employed individually grouped in together, countries speaking about economic value, resources. Anyway, while as rules of predicate acts with facts, methods, needs, and natures. Increasingly styles, needs, and natures that need to deny what nature is actually demonstrating to us. And need to pretend other at the same time as styles told to pretend it's about environmental change. They believe that. Not to use the word nature. So in other words, Wethersfield police have predicate acts with facts, methods, and they stack databases, also with courts. Increasingly with people, Wethersfield Pizza House has a Steven Stocko involved with wire crimes with them, with the judicial branch and the executive branch individually and grouped, predicate acts with facts, methods, individually and then further grouped. And then also as their roles with campuses, intercities through time. I never had a verbal conversation with Steven Stocko. The closest I ever had to it, I said, is Maria Bazzino there? And he called Wethersfield police as a passion crime, too, with FBI Director Robert Luskin and a whole bunch of people tied to it as a Dean Judd from Central Connecticut State University, involved with people with the bordering countries and inter-services, fire department, Air Force, neighbors of the Air Force. There are neighbors of a Paul Kelly, increasingly involved also with FBI, with WTNH, with people at the corners of streets on Church Street in Old Wethersfield, and all along from there, all along from the founding locations, spots next to it, all along like the Witch Trial Place in Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. From there, all the way along Route 175 through Newington, from Old Wethersfield through Newington, and all the way to Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, and all sides of that. There are names from a whole bunch of different countries with Connecticut interbranch, long-term families and ones that are short-term. These are the collusions with all natures of differences. Some black KKK, Latino themed, Confederate flag themed, Italian themed, differences, rackets, roles with the falsified police reports, putting fake things in databases, roles with abuses of the kids, of the leader of the kids, and the difference of them abused or the others, have mixed natures of organized crimes manifest at all natures of campuses originally and still. Again, we have black people's whites of eyes to know clearer than day. One of the things that it's about the second you change, when nature communicates about black and white, you're involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes. Blood clots. In other words, the black-white identity is law. You fail. You're worse than failed as collusion while being and having been used remote We're going to take charge and we're going to show you how to think. We're going to show you what to say, what to do. We're going to make a Who Disbelieves Act. And simultaneously, we're going to make a hyper. I'm not even a lawyer, thank God. If you guys can get Judge Napolitano to have one of those meetings with me, like those people he has meetings with, it will change the world. I know some, please, you guys, international commerce is forced because there are so many people so hungry and everything's tactically natured. And all the experts were supposed to speak to this for ourselves and for our leaders. And for the difference that was is used remotely by the breaching method too. Clearer than day, the breaching method it keeps the styles of logic at A through Z, blaming other things others themselves. Like why and how the suburbs look almost exactly like America and Russia and in Ukraine. Even though these are countries that can traverse the earth easily. But we still have, since before our founders were born, styles of houses involved with the torture, extortion, fact, human nature, slavery method of everyone. All exceptions in exception nature that appear to be in demonstration of other. Like this person's thing that came with demonstration / S of the same thing. Like saying. So in other words, please, Tulsi Gabbard and President / Chief Trump, many ways I could defend, I could speak about the difference of that better than anyone has ever heard it spoken about. And partially because I understand there are many ways a lot of people can speak about and know the things I don't know about. See, but they're in the nature of debate and with quality aspects in nature of fact treatment nature that a breaching method used, perfected method, since before modern religious messages were born, there are proofs. And so I'm giving a heads up because little rap guy and friends are about this. But they're also about, in other words, I also want to make a hyper theater for a website where like a virtual movie studio. And but I want to make it philanthropic too, because it's so big, we should be able to do this. And we have to we need to reverse the colors too, for parts. So I can show you guys something. Black people. No, not one has seen the whites of eyes. And when we try to discern, or when we speak about it, we are sensed. And this is adapted to how that works is recorded. Per phenomena, I could prove it to all. We could observe this. A whole bunch of people recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There's a Kevin Harris who was influenced by his family members who put things in fake about databases about me with people in my kindergarten class and people that lived next to it involved with them. Involved with that lived next to my kindergarten class with people with the name Demora. Recorded and confessed, demonstrated, confirmed involved with World Trade Center attack through other natures of organized crimes involved with them. And their rules with their family members per themselves, as ones with the name Scalora over there, I noticed were there right before the World Trade Center attack. The night before, like a Claudia Scalora was outside my hotel room. Pretty sure that was her, in other words. Other ways, the Scalora's involved with that. And with the Ninth Circuit Court right next to the World Trade Center, right before the attack. With names on both sides of that, and the court itself, increasingly involved with names before the World Trade Center attack, interstates, Oh, too, in this video I put the link to that Congress is speaking about Miami. There are people with Miami with the name Scalora who are increasingly involved with people who had problems with home break-ins in my area when I was a kid. Ones with the name DeMauro involved with former director of the FBI Robert Luskin, and courts that have been stacking fake things, including with the family members of judges and prosecutors, victims advocates who had time collusions with the victims, the people that stole a speaker box from a victim, and the court at the same time, putting the same collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and people with their educators, with identity theft, fraud, slanders against others, not even in classes with them. Then they try to make fake exceptions with, increasingly with my neighbors too. They put them in collusions they shouldn't have hid what I recorded when I was a freshman. Increasingly, because they have people, they have identity theft, fraud, slanders. That's one of the things manifest at A through Z. There are roles, needs, and styles that a breaching method shows them they have to hide as roles, needs, and styles of identity theft, fraud, slanders. That's what speaks for the law and pretends that it could speak for integrity. Black pupils. Forgiveness is not to blame it that way. Forgiveness is to understand how this breaching method employed. Other communicated for James Madison and for our founders behind him, his plan. Then they communicated for themselves. We're supposed to discern how uses of their words, pretending not to realize what they declassified about that, or using what some expert says about them, or the difference of that. The nature debate contains quality aspects in nature that were used remotely since before computers. The databases of the republic for which we stand, that was in ancient times before religious messengers were even born. Already, the breaching method had forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded. Names A through Z blame other things, others themselves, for things that a breaching method caused. Not as names A through Z, but through, while as them only as the species body, but then forcing them from inside it to then defend that too, while taking themselves, having taken humanity, as humanity was taken, incapable of affording to be, let alone to protract any voice with use of short words proper by the identity the sciences share, by the identity that guides all things. Bakshi, I thank you. Have a great night. Thank you.